So there are elections in New York today. So that means yours truly will be voting shortly. I know that a lot of people who watch this show or listen to this show are in New York. If I'm not mistaken, the top 3 states are Texas, I think, might actually be number 1 for Secular Talk viewership, at least the last time I looked at the demographics, which was honestly probably about a year ago. But it's Texas, California, and New York, I think, are the top 3 states that watch or listen to Secular Talk. So I wanted to just tell everybody real quick who I'll be voting for in the primaries today. First and foremost, Cynthia Nixon. Cynthia Nixon is running for governor against Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is a corporate Democrat. He's corrupt. My favorite story about Andrew Cuomo is when he started a anti-corruption commission, and then as soon as that anti-corruption commission said, there's some sketchy stuff going on in your camp, so we're going to investigate you guys, he disbanded the anti-corruption commission. That's almost like a parody of what would happen in a situation where a corrupt politician goes after corruption. They turn the scope on him, and then he's like, oh, what? No. See, what happened was, anyway, shut down the commission. So that's a good example of the kind of guy that he is. He also signed an anti-BDS law. It basically makes it so that you can't receive public funding if you also support BDS. It's deeply against the First Amendment. I think the ACLU has either sued over this or expressed deep concerns over this. It's something that I despise with every fiber of my being. He cut a deal to keep power in the hands of Republicans in the New York State Senate. So again, it's just Machiavellian bullshit. It's a way for him he was hoping nobody knew about that so that he could stand up, I am fighting for all of these populist left ideas, look at me. But really, they weren't going to pass because you're the one who worked behind the scenes to hand control of the New York State Senate over to Republicans in the first place. So he's just, he's corrupt. He's corrupt. It's as simple as that. Now, Bernie Sanders did not endorse Zephyr Teachout. Why? Well, Bernie Sanders, I'm sure all of you already know this, but he basically works tirelessly to try to get his ideas permeating in the Democratic Party, and he wants his ideas to become the main ideas in the Democratic Party, and I agree with him on that because I agree with Bernie on the policies. So what happened is Bernie Sanders convinced Andrew Cuomo to do a free college bill in New York, and I remember when they did this whole, press conference over it, and Andrew Cuomo announced it, and Bernie Sanders was right next to him, and he spoke at the event. And so it was a smart political move on Andrew Cuomo's part, because what that does is, because Andrew Cuomo is going to push the free college bill that Bernie Sanders supports, now kind of handcuffs Bernie Sanders so that Bernie cannot turn around in the next election when there's a left-wing challenger to Andrew Cuomo to endorse the left-wing challenger to Andrew Cuomo. Because Andrew Cuomo already kind of played ball with Bernie and said, sure, I'll do these, this free college bill. So let's go. Let's announce it together. We can make a whole thing of it. And it was a very, again, Machiavellian. You're going to keep hearing that word when it comes to Andrew Cuomo. Machiavellian move in order to make it so that Bernie, at best, or at worst, I should say, is going to stay out of the race. And that's what's happening. Bernie's staying out of the governor's race. I think deep down he prefers Cynthia Nixon, of course, because Cynthia agrees with Bernie on way more of the policies than Andrew Cuomo does, and Bernie cares deeply about the policies. But that move from Andrew Cuomo was a smart move to make it so that Bernie now has to go, he worked with me, he did the free college bill I wanted, now I can't come out against him. So, and some of you might say, hey, fuck it, he should come out against him anyway. I understand where you're coming from with that perspective, but if Bernie were to do that, then that sends a signal to people in the Washington, D.C. establishment and just the Democratic establishment writ large, and it says, no matter what, don't work with him, don't trust him under any circumstance, and you were right to have ostracized him. That's the message that the Democratic establishment would take away from that. I mean, I don't think they would really play ball with Bernie in a serious way anyway, so perhaps it would just be fine for him to stab them in the back and say, yeah, I'm going to go for Cynthia Nixon, because I agree with Cynthia Nixon. But either way, honestly, I don't really care that much about, in this particular instance, what Bernie says or what he does. He's just staying out of the race, whatever. Cynthia Nixon is a Justice Democrat, by the way. She's for Medicare for all, free college, living wage. I mean, you go down the list of the policy priorities. She's in favor of the right ones, whereas Cuomo, I'll give you just one more good example. Cuomo is against legalizing recreational marijuana. What? He's a Democratic governor from a massively Democratic state, but he's against legalizing marijuana. Why? He takes a tremendous amount of money from the alcohol lobby. So it's corruption. That's what it is. It's just corruption. It's as simple as that. Now, Cynthia Nixon is in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana, and I think she brought this up at the debate, and she made some great comments about how, listen, it's in New York, it's basically effectively legal for white people anyway, and it's just used to lock up poor people of color in the same way, stop and frisk was used like, okay, we're just going to crack down on minority communities and give us an excuse to ignore their privacy rights and their right to protection from unreasonable search and seizure. So put that out the window and we're just going to, harass one community. It's not like the guys on Wall Street don't have a lot of cocaine in their pocket or illegal pills, but there were no stop and frisk of people on Wall Street. It's a corrupt way to try to police communities. And it's deeply unconstitutional. So Cynthia Nixon's in favor of legalizing marijuana, in favor of ending the drug war. She's just better than Andrew Cuomo. It's as simple as that. So I'll be voting for Cynthia Nixon. I'll also be voting for Zephyr Teachout for Attorney General. So Zephyr Teachout ran against Andrew Cuomo the last time around, and she did way better than expected. She had no money, very little name recognition at the time, and she scared Andrew Cuomo. I mean, she still lost, but she did way better than expected. And there were articles at the time that kind of ended Andrew Cuomo's presidential aspirations, or it should, because he could barely fend off a challenger in his own state. So how would he fare on the national level if he wants to run for president? And he does want to run for president. Let's be clear about that. So Zephyr Teachout, again, populist left, very strong on all the issues. I don't doubt for a second that she'd go after Wall Street. I don't doubt for a second she'd go after the Trump administration. I don't doubt she's superb. So I'm voting for Zephyr Teachout. And then also there's one more candidate who is Bernie endorsed for lieutenant governor. His name is Jumaane Williams. So I honestly don't know much about Jumaane Williams. I don't know much about the people that he's running against, to be fair. But on this issue, I trust Bernie's judgment enough to vote for Jumaane Williams. So it's Jumaane Williams, lieutenant governor. It's Cynthia Nixon for governor, and it's Zephyr Teachout for attorney general. That's how I'll be voting. I just want to let everybody know the election is today. So if you're in New York, and also if you're registered as a Democrat, then you head to the polls and you vote. And that's the thing that sucks about one of the things that sucks about New York politics is closed primaries. So, listen, I've said it a million times before. The second we have open primaries, if we were to have them in New York, I would burn my registration card as a Democrat, register as an independent, and then, continue to obviously vote for the Democratic candidates and the independent candidates and the Green Party candidates and whatever. The left-wing candidates I support, I would vote for, but I would be an independent and do that. Because of the way the system works in New York now, you can't do it. You have to be registered as a Democrat to have your vote count and matter. The most important votes you'll ever cast are primary votes. And unfortunately, if you're not registered as a Democrat in New York, you're basically giving up the most important votes you have, your primary vote. So that's why I've always been, an advocate of the strategy that even if you hate the Democratic Party, and even if you have very strong criticisms of them, at least in closed primary states, you simply have to register as a Democrat. It's not a question. Because if you don't do it, then you're giving up the most important thing that you do in elections, and I think that's honestly just silly. I think that's not even a strong enough word. I think it's dumb. I do. Now, if you're in an open primary state, that's a different scenario, and I would actively encourage you to not register as a Democrat and register as an independent or whatever else. But in New York, I hope everybody registers as a Democrat so you can go and you can vote in these elections because they're really important and they really matter. Now, finally, let me just say this. There was a poll that came out the other day, had Cynthia Nixon down 41 points to Andrew Cuomo. That's kind of a bullshit poll, and here's why. When you look at how they did the poll, about 60% of the people they spoke to were over the age of 55. So, and this, by the way, this happened with Ocasio-Cortez, too. In the poll leading up to her election, it's like, oh my God, she's down by however much. It was over a dozen points. It was a lot. So, don't be discouraged is my point. It says down 41 points, but if you're only talking to people who are over the age of 55, and Cynthia Nixon's strongest base of support is going to be millennials, well, then that poll is pretty much useless now, isn't it? And remember, Bernie Sanders, wasn't he down like 30 points in Michigan or something like that in the 2016 primary election, and he ended up winning? I mean, so these things are possible. Now, I'm not saying she's going to win, and I don't want anybody to get it twisted. Andrew Cuomo is definitely a favorite. He is a favorite, and he is a strong favorite. But I would be absolutely floored if he won by 41 points. No, that poll is skewed. It's biased in favor of older voters. Older voters are more likely to go to Andrew Cuomo. So ignore the noise and just focus on doing what you got to do, which is getting your votes in there. And then we'll see what happens. And we'll move forward from there.